I'm excited about preaching this morning. And I hold on, okay? Because it is wild and crazy what God is doing right now. It is wild. Thursday morning, I got up and I've been spending time just in some real intentional time with the Lord, just going, God, what are you doing? I've taken serious the whole pray for workers of the harvest. And all through my journal, you would just find that's what I'm praying. God, you told us to pray for that, so God, I'm praying for it. And I remembered Thursday morning, I'm waking up and I'm journaling. I'm just like, God, I was overwhelmed. I was like, God, what are you doing? God, I need you to get us ready. By the way, church, I'm throwing you under the bus in a lot of my prayers. God, we got to be ready. What are you doing? God, there's something happening. God, I need you to get our feet ready. God, I need you to get our eyes ready. God, I need you to get us ready because something is happening, and I don't know what it is. There is something happening, church. I don't know what it is, but I know that God's a part of it. I was in Thailand, and God gave me two numbers. He gave me the number 300, and he gave me the number 2 years. I had no clue. I was just like, Lord, whatever. I don't have to know what that is right now, but I know that in time you're going to tell me what it is, and so I'm just going to wait. So I just kind of held them in, and this past Tuesday, I just kind of started praying a little bit more. God, what does that even mean? God, what does 300 mean? What are you doing with that? Thursday, I get up, and I'm just praying for you. I'm praying for excitement. I'm praying that God would move our feet. And I get to this place where I'm going, God, grow us. God, move us. God, teach. And I said, God, I pray for 300. And I thought I knew what he was talking about. In my mind, I was like, all right, 300, here we go. God, thank you for the 300 new people, right, God? 300 new people, right, God? And I'm sitting there, and he wouldn't let me write people. He said, I'm not asking for 300 people, and I'm not going to bring you 300 people. He said, I'm bringing you 300 families. And I went, excuse me. God's okay with that prayer, by the way. God, I'm going to need you to make that real clear. I said, because that is dumb. I'm doing math real quick, and I'm not great at it. I can do church math. It's about 1,000 of you here today. But I'm doing the math real quick, and I'm going, God, on the average, because our people don't know how to have just one or two, and then they adopt. I said, God, that's 1,400, 1,500 people. I said, what do you do with that? God, what? As soon as I kind of said, what? He said, but I'm king of the harvest. I'm the king of the harvest. And those are just my people. So my next prayer was just, God, you're king of the harvest. And then my next prayer was, God, I am overwhelmed with joy. Because this is you. 300 families. I can't even begin to fathom. So I know we're doing this series called Encounters with Jesus. So I'm going, so God, what do I do with this? I don't want to just preach on this. God, there's something here that you're speaking to me, and I'm listening, God. I just need to know where you want me to go. And immediately I saw Peter walking on water, and I was like, okay. That's a pretty powerful encounter. So I'm in my Bible, and I've been reading through Nehemiah and some of Jeremiah, and so I just kind of flip open my Bible, and I just kind of open it up, and I wasn't exactly sure where I was going, and I was about to jump on Google and do that good search, where did Peter walk on the water? That's okay for you to do that, people. It's okay. And right when I was getting ready to Google it, I realized I opened right up to Matthew 14. So I'm like, fine, Jesus, I get what you're saying. So this morning, if you have your Bibles, open up to Matthew 14 with me. We're going to be in verse 22. And I want you to start with this, okay? Listen to me when I say this, because this is critical. Where Jesus is, that's where all the excitement is taking place, and that's where I want us to be. Okay, listen again. Wherever Jesus is, That's where the excitement and the fun and the wild and the stories, that's where that exists. And that's where I want us to be. I don't want us to be anywhere else other than where Jesus is. It's not about us going and trying to find a place that we can exist. It's just going, God, where are you? Because wherever the excitement is, that's where I want to be. Wherever you're working, that's where I want to be. Is that where you want to be? I hope so. Otherwise, you're going to live this real boring life if you're not with him. Because where he is, that's the best place. Even in our story today, join with me. 14, starting in verse 22. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. Remember, right before that, he just fed the 5,000. He and his disciples fed the 5,000. Didn't send them off. They had a little bit of food, 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. He multiplies it, they feed it. Feed all of them. And after he dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. The mountain. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. Just picture all of this, okay? And in the 4th watch of the night, that's somewhere between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the water. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come on." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, then the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So dive in with me, okay? Hold on with this. Jesus is with his disciples, feeds a lot of people. He says, "I need y'all to go to the other side," puts them in the boat, sends them off. He goes off to pray. By himself alone. We see that lots of times, right? Going off to pray, spending time with the Father, regrouping, reconvening, and then joining back with the disciples. The only problem is his disciples had pushed off into the sea, and they were quite a ways out. They were just itty bitty, so he had to walk over some really deep water. And so he sends them out. Enter Jesus, seaside left. Disciples in the boat, beaten to pieces, by the way. I don't know if you've ever been in a boat on unstable water. It's not fun. And we got fishermen that are doing it. Now, you got a tax collector that's in there, and he's probably a little on the freaked out side. But you got fishermen in there, and they're getting beat up by the water. Enter Jesus, walking on the water. Now go back to my initial statement. What did I say? Wherever Jesus is, that's where the fun is. And that's where I want us to be. Jesus walking on the water. So the question we have to ask is, how do we get where Jesus is? How do we go where Jesus is? I think this is a pretty good depiction and picture of an encounter with Christ that got someone out of the boat and out where Jesus was. How did that happen? I think there's some things that we get to hold on to. I love in verse 26, it says this, "But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, 'It's a ghost,' and they cried out in fear." Now hear me out. These disciples were watching all the waves. They had their eyes very clearly directed on the things in which they were terrified of, wondering which one was going to capsize them. But all the more, their eyes are up, so they're alert. You ever been there? Where you're just like, man, eyes up. Like, here we go. What am I looking for? How am I? And in the process of their eyes being up, they see Jesus walking on the water. Now, here's a principle that I need us to understand. And I'm seeing this take place in our church. I'm seeing this take place as I journal, as I spend time with him. I'm watching this, that Jesus shows himself where we are. He shows himself where we're at. In the storm, walking on water, in the midst of their biggest fight, Jesus is there and he shows himself. Right where they are. In the presence of their struggle, Jesus shows up. When they feel that they have nothing else that they can do, Jesus makes his appearance. What might have felt like a little last minute for the disciples was perfect timing for Jesus as he shows up and shows himself. Here's the reality. If our eyes are not up looking and watching, you just might miss him. If your head is buried, you may not see him. But Jesus showed up right where they were. And when their eyes were up looking, yes, even at the distraction and the storm and the waves and the wind, Jesus shows up louder than that, brighter than that, bigger than that. He shows up. Man, I love, how much Scripture talks about. Man, if your eyes are up and you are looking and your eyes are out and you're seeking, guess what you find? You find Jesus. What does he tell us? Deuteronomy 4:29. But from there you will seek the Lord your God and you will what? Okay, that is critical for us to grasp. You will seek the Lord your God and you will find him. Therefore, if you don't seek, guess what? You don't find. If you search after him with all, that's so many of our problems. We're great one day a week searching. For an hour, we are great searching for the great King. For 30 minutes a day, we're great at listening to our YouVersion app and searching. That's not all. That is not our definition that we live by when we say all. If you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul, this is an entirety, you'll find him. Look at this other verse, 1 Chronicles 16:11. Seek the Lord in his strength. Seek his presence continuously. Because when you do, you find where he's at. Let me ask you a question. Where is Jesus evident in your life right now? Where are you seeing that? Are you seeking it? Are you writing it down? Are you searching intently to see him? Because when we do, we find him. But watch this now. Okay, go back to our story. And they were terrified and said, it's a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But immediately, so they're afraid. And now they're making false accusations. They cried out in fear, but immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, take heart, it is I, don't be afraid. So their eyes are up. But the second thing that we see is that their ears were open. Eyes up, ears open. Because it's in that moment when our ears are open and ready to listen that we get to hear God speak. Eyes are up. I don't know if you've, again, been out where it's unstable on the water and the wind's blowing and the waves are crashing. They're loud. I was born, I guess, for a boat in the wind because I have a loud voice. But you're not really whispering on a boat when it's in chaos. Any boat people out there? Anybody agree? Yeah, you're a little panicky. So you're talking like this. Hey, here's what we got to do. So they're in a loud, loud, loud place. And Jesus says, take heart. And listen, he says, listen, hey, courage up here. I'm with you. Focus on me. I am with you. Don't be afraid. But here's how I need you to know how he speaks. Jesus speaks louder than anything else that we're focused on. And I don't know how this happened. I don't know how far Jesus was from the boat. But he speaks in a way where the disciples heard it. And he brings comfort. His voice carries over the distraction. Because he wants our attention. He speaks. I love what Jesus told his followers one day. John 10, verse 3 and 4. The sheep hear his voice. Who does? The sheep. Hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. And when he has brought out all of his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him. Why? Because they know his voice. Caleb was telling me a story, and I'm not quite sure where this story took place. I think somewhere over in the Holy Land, right? Okay, somewhere over in the Holy Lands, taking place where there's a guy that actually sees a shepherdess, female, shepherdess, right? And she got a bunch of sheep with her. And at one point in time, she's got all these sheep, and you just assume they're all her sheep, right? Until the shepherdess decides to walk away from the sheep and calls her sheep, and half of them walk. The other half don't. Why? Because they don't know her voice. They don't know her command. But her sheep, they do. And what do? They follow. They follow. He makes it clear. His sheep hear his voice, and he calls his sheep. Listen, he is not a silent God. We are just a hard-hearing people. We don't like to hear. Can I be honest with you? 300 new families scared me to death. I left 2 years alone. I said, Lord, I'm not even going to touch that one right now. 300 is enough. But he speaks. His sheep hear his voice. He calls his sheep by name. And he leads them, and they follow him because they know his voice. But if our ears are not open, if we are not his sheep, if we are not in his pasture, there's a problem. You can't hear him. He goes on to say the reason that you don't hear is because you don't belong. It's a belonging thing. Do we belong? Because if we belong, we hear. This is where things get even crazier. Enter Peter from the boat. And Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. That almost sounds kind of like a prayer that Randy preached on last week, right? Lord, help my unbelief. There's this moment in between right now where Peter is, where he's kind of going, God, like, if it's you, call me out. I think he knew who it was. That's just me. But I think he knew. And Peter's seen enough at this point in time where he's going, call me out there because only you are the one that could do this. So call me out. Why? Peter had been with Jesus long enough that he knew where Jesus was. That's where the party's at. Where Jesus is where the joy is. Where Jesus is where the excitement is. Where Jesus is where our peace is. Where Jesus is where our joy is at. Where Jesus is, that's where I want to be because that's where it's taking place. Not at church. Because if Jesus isn't here, there's no joy. There's no excitement. So don't chase church. I want to be where he's at. Wherever he is at. And so what does he pray? Maybe one of the craziest prayers in the Bible. Listen, he's not done with gravity. He may have not had a name for it yet. But he gets that you fall, and when you fall, you land. He's a fisherman. He knows how water works. People don't float on it. They don't stand on it. They don't walk on it. They get in a boat, and they float on it. If it's you, command me to come to you. And I love this part. Tell me to come to you. I would have left it there. But what does he put? Come to you on the what? Water. He had direction, he had location. I want to come to you on the water. Listen, I don't pray prayers like that. My prayer life, that's crazy praying. God, call me to you wherever you are. You happen to be on the water? On the water. I'm more the type of like, hey, God, like, call me to the ground that I know how to walk on. Call me on the ground that I know how to navigate. Because in case you don't show up, God, I still can walk. I don't need your help to do that. But Peter says, call me to the place where you're going to have to hold me up. I prefer the mountains. I like that place. I can walk those. I can climb those. The shore, I'm in. But call me to you where you are on the waves? I'd much rather walk with Jesus on the shore. I like walking with him where I know how to walk. Let me ask you a question. Where do you like to walk? Where do you like it? Where do you like your feet to get established? You see, I like to walk with Jesus. Let's get real nitty-gritty here, okay? I like to walk with Jesus when church is smooth sailing and we can just do what we know how to do. I like that. Show up, predictable. A little bit unpredictable fun because we got to keep the element of surprise in there, right? But I like to know what we're doing. I like to know how we're going to do it. I like to know how we're going to get there. 300 families, Dustin. God, that's shaky. That's shaky. That's out there. Why don't we do something more our size? 300 people? That's a lot. Let's do something doable, Jesus. Keep it at a place that I can manage it. That other's way too big for me. Where my head's at. But not too big for him. New building, new location. Jesus, isn't it easier just to stay put and do what we're doing? Well, there's things that got in the way of that. Sorry. We can't stay here. You ready for this next part, church? This is where it's going to start getting bumpy. This is where the waves are going to start kicking. If this is what Jesus is calling us to do, and this is where he is at, specifically with where we are as a church, because there's a lot of places that he's working in your life, and you're going to have to decipher that. What waves is he on in your life that you're going to have to ask, God, are you really worth enough for me to say, God, call me where you are on those waves? But here's where I'm at right now, right? So if this is where God has us, then we have work to do that's going to mean that we're going to have to walk in ways that are wild and crazy for us to get where he's at. Are we there yet? Not a chance. Your steps are going to be, we got to give more. We got to serve more. We got to get ready for what he's doing. This is 100% participation. This is us saying, God, we want to go where you are. Wherever that is and whatever that looks like. It's going to get uncomfortable. It might even get wilder than what some of you think church should look like. But wherever he is, that's where the excitement is, and that's where I want to be. It might challenge what you like and where you are. But here's what I need you to understand. Jesus speaks out from the wild and crazy and says what? Come on. He's not standing on the shore saying, hey, row over here and get out of the boat. He says, come on, right here, right now, let's go. And Peter answered him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. Hey, where's the safest place for Peter to be? Where? Or the boat. It's sure not out on the water. Where's the safest place that you could be right now? Have you found your safe spot? And do you just think Jesus might call you out of that? Hey, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. He said, come on. So Peter, because he's about half dumb anyway. Peter's not the smartest one. He's just willing to get the job done. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on water and came to Jesus. They had their eyes open in the boat. They saw him. They had their ears open. They were listening. So what's our responsibility now? Eyes up, ears open. You ready? Our responsibility is to have feet that are ready to move where Jesus is, calling and leading us. Our responsibility is to say, God, what are you doing? That's what you're doing. Let's go. Get out of the boat. Let's walk. Okay, let's go. I'm out. Because that's what we see Peter doing. He's showing us a picture of what it looks like to walk in obedience. He's doing what Jesus is doing. Do you know that that's his call for us? It's to look like him. I found it interesting throughout this passage. Why doesn't Jesus just stop the waves? I mean, haven't we seen him do it before in the Bible? Disciples with him in the boat being tossed around. Jesus is with them in the boat. They're freaking out. He wakes up and just says, stop. Whew, stops. Why didn't he do that? Why didn't he stop the waves? Why is he letting it continue? Here's my thought. And this is my thought. This is coming from some time of prayer. And he's saying, God, what do we do with this? Could it be that Jesus wanted them to see that what they saw as obstacles, what they saw as uncertainty, what they saw as unwalkable, Jesus used as stairs to get where he was going? You're scared of what I walk on. Listen, these are just my steps that I'm taking to get where you're going to go with me. They were a means to get us to him. Psalm 23. I'm going to lay that over this for just a second. The Lord is I shall not. He makes me lie down in. He leads me beside. This doesn't look like any of that. Does it? So did he just become a bad shepherd? Did he just put Peter in danger? I'll let you sit on that one for just a second. Because how often when we called into something that's a little bit outside of us that you're going, but God, that doesn't look like greener pastures and still waters. He's not turning into a bad one as he invited Peter to walk on the raging seas. Not if still waters and greener pastures is just simply Jesus. You know what our problem is? I think we have a wrong view of green pastures and still waters. I think our green pastures and still waters is this moment of arrival and almost this retirement mentality where we just don't have to do anything anymore. Take me to that place, God, where I can just lay down and make grass angels. This is so good. And the trickling brook. Oh, God, this is so good. I'm just going to sit and just meditate on you. But what happens if the still waters and the greener pastures is going to get a little bit wild and crazy, but the one that's stable in the midst of all of it is just Jesus himself. And so when you're with Jesus, man, it doesn't matter the storm, you're in greener pastures. Because that's where he said he takes us. Still waters may have big waves and loud wind, but here's the reality. When you're with him, it is like you're in just tranquility because you're with him. Where he's at. Peter knew where the safest place to be was. And that was with Jesus. Peter said, call me to you. And Jesus said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked in the water and came to Jesus. When you go in faith where Jesus is, you get to be with him. When you go in faith where Jesus is, what do you get? Him. When you go in faith where Jesus is, you get to do from faith what Jesus does. So where are you going in faith that puts you in the greener pastures and the still waters? That is Jesus. Where are you going in faith? Are you going in faith where you get to do what Jesus did and what he does? But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and he began to sink and he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, oh, you have little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Even in the midst of Peter walking on the firmest place he could be with Jesus. Doesn't that give you peace to know that you're still going to mess it up? I had this crazy thought. That at the same time that Jesus is sustaining Peter's feet, do you know that he also held those waves in place too? But Jesus would never take us where it's rocky, would he? Jesus would never allow us to put our feet on something that's a little bit unstable, would he? He would never do that. So he's sustaining his feet and he's holding the waves in place. And the wave that he saw, he looked away and he sank. I don't have to preach anything on that. You get what's happening here. Can I tell you something? This is one of those crowd thinning moments. Jesus doesn't want to make your path easier. He wants to make it passable. He's not going to make your life easier. Randy, is life easier? Nope. Brian, you're successful. Is life easy? No. But are you doing it? You doing it? You don't want your life easy, because then you don't need him. I don't want to just do this. I want to see what 300 new families look like. That's not easy. That's not easy for any one of us here who does anything. But that's where I want to be, because he makes it possible. He allows us to walk through it. And when our vantage point is Jesus, we have everything we need to do everything he asks. Everything. I'll ask the band to come down. What's he asking of you? You're standing where you're at. Have you even began step one of just saying, God, would you just call me where you are? Let me back up. Are your eyes open? Are your ears ready? Are you looking? Are you watching, listening, waiting with anticipation and expectation that when you pray whatever you're praying, man, he's going to answer it when it is united and knit deeply into his will? Do you believe that? Are you living in such a way that you go, I believe that and I'm going to do it? God's fixing to bring some really big asks of us. Are we ready to do whatever it's going to take to get wherever he wants us to go? I don't know where he has you in your spot right now. I don't know what your waves are right now. I don't know what your boat looks like. I don't know what anything looks like in your life. Some of you maybe. But are you ready to be where he's at and do what he did? Our church is fixing to make a big jump. You know me, I am not a numbers talking guy. I don't ever do that. I've been a part of churches that do. Because numbers is not what I'm after. 300 families is a lot of hearts. It's a lot of souls. That may not be able to see clearly who God is and who they are in this life that he's called them to live. The by God vantage point is a church that believes that when your eyes are set on him, it changes everything. And that's what I want to see. So Jesus, call us wherever you want to call us. Call us where you want to call us. God, we're in. Father, would you just speak clearly, God, in our hearts and our lives, that are deep in our souls. God, you're enough. You're enough. So wherever you call us, we know that you're there. And God, that's where the fun is. That's where life is. That's where life is. So call us out on the water. That's where you are. I think that's where we want to be.